So good evening, welcome to our lecture tonight. Our guest speaker is Professor Michael Fryer. He is the professor of practice at the Joan B. Kroc School of Peace Studies at the University of San Diego. He's going to present to you a very important lecture tonight on how, listen to this, how to complain effectively. And so I know we all want to learn how to do that, but we are excited to have you here tonight. So please give him a hand.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this very warm welcome. This is my first time in Missouri, and I'm delighted to be here. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not originally from this part of the world. I'm from Yorkshire in the north of England, but I've lived in San Diego for the last 10 years or so. I wanted to start off with some gratitude. Thank you so much to everyone behind the scenes. I finally got to meet Bill Sheehan, who I'd been communicating with for 3 years, and then recently alongside with Janice, kind of the logistics. Any event that you ever go to, pay attention to the people behind the scenes, without whom that event would not happen. In terms of just general in a professional context, pay attention to the people working the kitchens, doing the cleaning. I guarantee if you develop healthy, authentic, genuine relationships with them, they will make your life so much easier. All the little things. Very practical tip, learn, remember, and use people's names. When I was my last year at college, that's what someone said to me. You'll always benefit from it. So thank you so much to everyone behind the scenes who's made this happen. I really appreciate it. I also wanted to express thanks to Jan Sunoo. So Jan is Dr. Harold Sunoo's son, and that Jan is the person who initially extended this invitation to come and speak in this lecture series that honors the memory of his dad, who I've learned a number of things over the last 3 years, because this original invitation came before COVID. So this has been 3 years kind of trying to get this date in, so it's a delight to be here. So thank you so much to Jan for this invitation. And thank you all for being here. Whenever I teach or do any kind of presentation, I always go into it with an acknowledgement that everyone in the room could be somewhere else right now. So this is the end of the semester. I'm sure you're all very busy. If you're not a student, then I'm sure you're also very busy, and there's other things you could be doing. So thank you so much to be here, and anyone who's watching this online at any point in the future, I appreciate you taking the time to do it as well. So thank you everyone for that. One of the most wonderful things that comes from an invitation to speak to a group of people is it forces you to think about ideas and provide some kind of structure around ideas that you've just been toying with. For me, this all kind of sparked by the fact that in general, I think we're all really good at complaining. And I think we're really bad at complaining at the same time. We're really bad because we actually don't end up with the thing that we want. And so this opportunity to kind of try and explore, put some structure and form around that is something that I'm really grateful for. Before I kind of click onto the next slide, my job title, I am both delighted and embarrassed by. The thing that delights me about it is the professor of practice. It's an applied side. Education for me needs to apply. It needs to be something that works. Theoretical concepts which just stay up here, no usefulness in the real world, I don't really have much time for. So the practice element of it, I think, is really significant. And that's my background. I don't come from an academic background. I have flirted with a PhD on a few occasions. I don't have one. But I'm grateful that the dean of the Joan B. Kroc School of Peace Studies, Dr. Patricia Marquez, values that applied side, and that's why I'm teaching at a graduate level at a US university without having a PhD. So the professor of practice thing, I love. The thing that I'm slightly embarrassed by is that in the UK, you don't get the title professor unless you've been an academic, a very distinguished academic for about 30 years. You're just doctor until that point. So when I sent my friends who have PhDs my business card, a little photograph of it, they're like, professor about that? How did you manage professor of practice? So it's like, So it's the applied side which I value. My favorite thing about the title, though, is I was doing a presentation once, and somebody in the audience looked up at a slide like this, and they said, "Professor of Practice, does that mean you're not quite there yet?" I was like, I like that. That's good. We're not quite there yet. When I was learning more about Dr. Sunoo and the way he approached ideas, I thought, okay, I'll try and craft a lecture that he would have enjoyed listening to. Now, obviously, I'll never know because sadly he's passed away, but learning about the kind of the approach and that idea of education being something that needs to be subversive in its purest form. Education, really good education, makes you think differently about how you've been thinking, and it makes you imagine a world that's bigger than the one that you know. And I think the way in which you do that is what I want to try and explore through the use of some stories, some practical examples, and just kind of walk you through some ideas. And these ideas I am still working on. The title, How to Complain Effectively, I should probably turn it into a book, but I probably never will. But I probably should, because I think there's some value in it. So I appreciate you basically being a pilot and exploring it, and I look forward to chatting to you more about it. So the first slide is a quote. So this quote, I'll read it first, is basically saying we need to be willing to waste time with people, not just spend it. So when I first started working in this field, it was 1996, and I was working in Northern Ireland at a Peace and Reconciliation Centre called the Corrymeela Community, which is the oldest centre for peace and reconciliation in the island of Ireland. And what it did was bring people from different identities together to explore who they were, who the other was, and the relationship between them, and the tension and the similarities. This quote was something I remembered, it kind of went into my memory when I was straight out of college back in 1996. And it says so much, and I've thought a lot about it since. Now, we live in a very, very busy culture. As students, you are very, very busy. In life, we're very, very busy. The students who I work with are stressed. They are overwhelmed with the amount of work that they have to do. And I think we could learn a lot from this idea about wasting time with people, not just spending it. The principle behind it in terms of peace, in the broader political sense, is you can't invent resilience in a crisis. This is about relationships. And so when you decide that you're just going to hang out with someone and have an interesting chat, not because it's leading to an assignment, not because it's just because they're there, you are investing in relationship. You're making a connection. You're kind of giving that person the quality of the time that you have. And that's what I think is really valuable in this sense. When you are present to someone, when you waste time with someone, one of the things you do is you get to know them. You have to make the connection, you start sharing stories. A friend of mine was training to be a marriage family therapist a number of years ago. He was a mature student, and there was another mature student on the program, and they did not like each other. They had major personality clash. But because they were studying for a marriage family therapist degree, counseling, they were encouraged to practice what they preach and just be in each other's company outside of the classroom, learn about each other, etc. My friend shared with me that through these interactions, their relationship got better. But what he realized was the reason why he didn't like her and why he was complaining so much about her, and the reason she was complaining about him, was his personality style and communication style reminded her of her ex-husband. And she reminded him of his mother. That is some heavy stuff going on there. But they were able to work through to the extent that when they did have communication, when they did have conversations and they were irritated, what they were able to do, the little sign in the back of her head said, no, it's not your mother. No, it's not your ex. Give them a break. And they were there and able to kind of work through and navigate and see beyond those complaints. I think there'd be real value in an educational context if we did a better job incentivizing wasting time with each other. I think we need to get creative, maybe tie it in with assignments, but we really need to kind of say this is important to give very practical advice in a real life professional context. that's where stuff happens. It really does. The small little interactions is often where we kind of put the big emphasis on the big events, but it's the small thing. Corrymeela, this Peace and Reconciliation Center, they know from experience that the transformative conversations across political divides are most likely to happen when people are drying the dishes after lunch, or when they're sitting down having a cup of tea at 11 o'clock at night. But you don't see that formally written on the program. It doesn't say, 2:10 p.m., transformative conversation with someone of a different political identity. 2:15 p.m., deeper conversations. It's just not there. You can't guarantee it's going to happen, but you create the space in which it might. I wanted to kind of say a little bit about this, the idea of teaching peace studies and teaching peace and how we explore it. And this photograph was taken in my backyard. So I live in about an hour from San Diego, up in the mountains, about 4,500 feet, in a small town called Julian. We are now officially part of the International Dark Skies community. We're one of the 1% of the American population that can see the Milky Way with the naked eye. And I was there when my friend Colin Richard took this photograph. He was 20 feet away from me, and I could see a lot of stars. I couldn't see that. The reason why we are able to see so many incredible stars, the Milky Way on that image, is because of my friend Colin's ability to use a camera, to know about exposures, etc. He was able to capture something that I couldn't see with the naked eye because of the lens, etc. And I think in terms of teaching peace, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give people a variety of different lenses through which you can see something which otherwise would be missed. And it's that sense of, okay, you put it on that, and then you have a deeper understanding of where someone's at. The other idea in terms of what peace means is a scholar practitioner called John Paul Lederach, who's hugely respected. In one of his books, The Moral Imagination, he talks about words for conflict that are used in Colombia, where he'd done a lot of work. And enredo is one of those words. And enredo basically means tangled up. That's how they would use it. And they're talking about a fishing net. So you imagine a big fishing net. After night, you have to try and untangle it. And he said, that's the process of conflict. Now, my guess is that most of you don't have much working experience with large fishing nets. But I bet you've all put your hand in your pocket and pulled out headphones that look like that. This is enredo. So if you think about our relationships, the complex, especially in a polarized societies where people are divided on either the kind of a real life identity choices or kind of perception of it, the process that we're involved with in terms of peace work is trying to untangle this mess. In an organizational context, this is what organizational conflict looks like. So the task of, and the thing is, I have no idea how it got like this. Like the tangle fairies are busy in my pocket, putting it all together. Now, if you think about, I once tried to kind of untangled it, and it took quite a while. The fascinating thing was, once it was fully disentangled, it still kept the memory of its tangledness. It wanted to go back. And that's what conflict's like. You can try and do an initiative and an event which untangles it, but the memory's there. It wants to go back. So this is an ongoing process. It's not a one-off event. Now I want to introduce my greatest teachers. So these are my daughters. Eloise is 8 and Lucette is 2. I did this type of peace work for 18 years before I became a parent. And I did some good work, I think. And I also, with hindsight now, think I talked a lot of nonsense. I really did. I would talk about self-awareness, and I still believe that self-awareness and an ongoing commitment to self-awareness is a fundamental core foundation on which effective work is done. Like knowing your triggers, what irritates you, how do you then kind of respond to that, and those kind of things. It's so important. But the way I would teach it was very, very naive. I don't think I realized how challenging it was until I became a dad. And my daughters have introduced me to what I'm now calling avoidable naivety. I should have known that saying just breathe and count to 10 was very naive. You can count to 10 very fast when you're angry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's like, by the way, taking a deep breath in between numbers helps. But this avoidable naivety, I think, is something that's really valued. So when we're talking about complaining, I think a lot of the times when we complain or express our frustrations, we are doing so very naively. And the avoidable element is that if you'd done your homework, you would have been able to overcome that, or you'd have known that it was coming. So when it comes to dealing with the challenges of being a parent, I often kind of reflect that there are some people in California with too much money who are paying exorbitant prices at very exclusive retreat centers to try and deal with the spiritual practice that I have on a daily basis of dealing with 2 small children and the pressures and the practices, etc. I'd actually be interested in hiring out my eldest daughter and her friends to one of those exclusive, expensive places. And basically, if after a 2-week retreat in which you've done every yoga position possible and meditated at an Olympic standard, if you can then cope with my daughter and her friends for 3 hours without cussing, arguing with each other, then you graduate. Because it's tough. And the point I'm raising here is life is tough. It's like there's challenges, but if we do our homework, we can move past them. One of the things that I've learned from being a parent and has been reinforced by being an immigrant is that we exist in different realities. We don't live in the same reality. And I think one of the challenges in this type of work is we assume that we all do. And then we get frustrated when someone doesn't do something that we would like or expect. So I want to illustrate that with a couple of little points. Okay, quick math. Any math majors or people doing math here? Any maths? Okay. What 1 + 1 is what? And feel free, audience participation time. Shout out the answer 2. Thank you very much. Eloise, my eldest, could prove to you that 1 + 1 can equal 1. 1 piece of Play-Doh plus 1 piece of Play-Doh is 1 piece of Play-Doh. It's messy. This type of work, so again, you're talking about peace and trying to understand where people are coming from. It's not simple. Now we move on to the English language section. What is that letter? No, it's not Z. It's a Z. In British English, you learn your A to Z. The alphabet starts with A and it ends with Z. By the way, the American ABC song works so much better. The rhyme in the English one just doesn't work. So if I was to, my license plate, car license plate, has 2 of these letters in. If AAA or someone is asking me for my license plate and I insist on saying Z, are they going to understand what I'm saying? No. So often when we're trying to insist that our way is doing, our way, our reality is the only reality, it's just not. It's like, and this is why it's messy. 1 + 1 can equal 1. And it's frustrating and it's challenging. But going in with these new lenses and different ways of seeing things can be a lot more kind of helpful in a way of doing it. There you are. Nice simple word. That pains me. I'm going to be honest with you. It pains me to look at that word because it's spelled wrong. That's how it should be spelled. Now that looks wrong to you, I'd imagine. It just looks weird. It's like, why is that U there? Where is it without a U? It's weird to me. If you think about some of the challenges that we face as a country, as a world, so much of it is rooted in the idea of insisting that your reality is right and demonstrating a lack of any kind of willingness to engage in the possibility that maybe a different reality exists. And that maybe if I'd lived in your reality, I would come to the same conclusion that you come to the conclusion right now. Maybe. That being open to the possibility that your reality isn't the only reality is really significant. One of the ways that I remember seeing this most impactfully was when I was a participant in a facilitation training in my hometown, Bradford, in the north of England. Bradford, there were 16 of us. Bradford has about 24% of the population have Pakistani heritage. It was an old textile town, and so a lot of people from Pakistan who are typically Muslim, and the 4 of the participants were Muslim. We were being trained how to be facilitators, and the facilitator was a man called Brian Lennon, who was from Belfast in Northern Ireland. At the beginning of the day, we were sitting down, and he said, I'm a Catholic priest. He says, I'm a Jesuit. I don't wear the collar, but I'm a Jesuit. And there's things that I'm maybe hesitant about or question, but I'm still a signed up member. I'm still a Christian. And then he looked at the 4 Muslims and he said, if I think about what you believe as Muslims or what I believe as a Christian, and if I'm honest, I have to say, I think you're wrong. And there was this sharp intake of breath around the room, like, what is he doing? And then he said, and if you think about what you believe as Muslims and you think about what I believe as a Christian, if you're honest, you'd have to say, I think you're wrong. Is that true? And you were like, yeah. He said, okay, does the fact that we both completely disagree about core ways in which we understand the world, does that core disagreement mean that we can't talk together on issues that are impacting both of our communities? And he said, no. He says, great. He says, I'm glad we've got that out of the way. Now let's get on with it. And it was a brilliant way of just kind of engaging and acknowledging difference, but then kind of the focus of where we are, what are we looking at. A couple more kind of language things that I think is helpful in trying to give us an insight into this type of work and what we can learn from it. Again, these are 2 things that I learned from the teaching of John Paul Lederach. And it's looking at the etymology, so the origins of words, which I think is fascinating. Looking deeper. So respect, it's Latin. So if you see the word re on something, what's it mean? The beginning, it's like re. Again, spect is where we get spectacle, spectator. So respect in its Latin root and its truest meaning means to look and to look again. So when you show someone respect, or when someone shows you respect, they're looking, they're moving past that first thing, and then they're looking again. It's a recognition. I see you. I understand what your reality has been. I know that. That's what respect is, and that's what we should bring to this type of work. Likewise with sincere, it goes back to the Latin, and this is in the Roman times when marble was the construction material of choice for the people with money. And unscrupulous marble merchants would find flawed pieces of marble that had cracks in, and they would put wax in the cracks and then polish it up so the marble looked great. How many of you speak Spanish? Okay. So the Spanish for without wax, sincera. So sincere came from the marble that was without wax. It was pure, it was full. You weren't trying to cheat someone. It was the real deal. And again, that type of engagement with people in this type of work, I think is hugely significant. Final one, and this is for any old, Diana, this one's for you, any old Norse scholars. Here's a word. I think if I was to offer money and give you a few guesses, you'd probably guess which English word this is an old Norse word, but we get the word, any guesses? Yes. So the word trust is from the Old Norse that means strong. So when you think about a relationship in which a core ingredient is trust, there's a strength. I said it in practical terms, a really good example a few years ago when I was doing a complex mediation that I was leading in local organizations in San Diego. And I was given an opportunity to meet with some of the key actors, the key participants. And I had 15 minutes with each. And at the end of that 15 minutes, one person in particular came up, she just said, "Why should I trust you?" And it was one of those questions which I immediately knew my answer's really important here. But I obviously didn't have time to think about it. But she said, why should I trust you? And I just looked at her and I said, there is no reason why you should trust me at this point. You've met me for 15 minutes. You can read my bio, but we have no relationship. Right now, I'm not going to pretend, say, oh no, you should definitely trust me. I need to earn that trust. And she looked at me and she said, good answer, and walked off. So bringing that essence into this work, I think, is really significant. A way of thinking, I think, is also helpful. I'm going to share two kind of peace pioneers who I think are often ignored. Those studying math or physics might have heard of Lewis Fry Richardson. He's someone who fractals and the way in which we measure coastlines and a lot of the ways in which we use meteorology, so weather forecasting, came from him. He was also a peace pioneer. He was a non-combatant. He refused. He was a conscientious objector in the First World War. As a result of that, he was blacklisted from going to any British academic institution. But he kept this work. It was like really a huge player in terms of measuring dynamics of conflict. The key thing that I wanted to kind of pass on to you is the idea of weather forecasting. So when it comes to trying to understand frustrations, your frustrations, how to make a difference in the world, bring about change, then we know you look to the weather. So I know, because I looked up earlier, tomorrow's high here in Fayette is 47. And then on Saturday, it's 61. And you'll be lulled into thinking it's going to be warm. But then on Sunday, it's going to be a high of 38. Because the weather forecasters have done their homework, and that's what they're going to tell us. In this type of work, peace, political science, we can do our homework. We can't predict with assurance, but you can tell if there's these patterns. When I was working in Northern Ireland, they knew that if there was hot summer, rivalry between two communities, alcohol consumption, sports rivalry, soccer result, if you put all those together, you might well get street violence. It was predictable, and so you adapt accordingly. So bringing that lens, I think, is really significant. Three, and again, this is this avoidable naivety that I think is so important we engage with. Three characteristics that I wanted to identify that I've learned over the years. So I'll briefly kind of go through some of these. One is the quality of the questions that we bring. Now, I've always loved this. I don't know whether it's a real piece of graffiti, but I like it. Question everything. Why? It's perfect. Fantastic. But this idea of bringing the quality of the questions. So if you think about dealing with kids fighting in a high school, the classic question would be, why did you hit him? The answer you're going to get is a really bad question. Like, because he's an idiot. I don't know. He said something. I don't know. He's kind of got the face you want to punch. Well, it's like you're not going to get a good response compared to what was happening yesterday afternoon that led up to that situation. Then you get a story. Bringing that insight and that perspective is what gives you the insights that you need. And simplistic questions, reductionist questions, are not going to help, especially when you're kind of bringing a complaint. Like, why are you always late? Why are you such a thing? Pay attention to the questions you ask. And then think, okay, is there a more skillful way of asking this question? So I live in mountain lion country. There's a mountain lion in this image. I'm going to step away, see if anyone can see it. Anyone see it? I appreciate it's a long way away. I didn't see it when I first saw it. There's the mountain lion. So pointer. Paying attention to things. So if you think about in this type of work, you're trying to bring about social change, pay attention. Who in the room always turns up but never speaks? Who used to share things but doesn't? What am I missing? One of my favorite questions in this type of work is, what did I miss? You go in with an analysis, you're trying to pay attention, you're trying to pick up everything, but then at the end you add, what did I miss? There's a humility to that, which I think is very valuable. And then as a result of it, and I'll give you an example in a minute, you find out a lot of information. So what we pay attention to, I think, is really significant. And then the quality of our presence. So this image here, I think, says so much. So you have there's two people who I'm fascinated by in this image. One is the old lady. So there's clearly so much going on. and everyone's trying to capture an image or a video that they will never ever watch again. But there's the illusion that somehow this is capturing it, where she's just fully present. The other person I'm fascinated by is the photographer who took it, because clearly there was some celebrity or something big, and there was probably photographers on the other side of the road. And I'd imagine all the other photographers were looking in that direction. But the photographer was noticing things. It was like, no, that's not the photo here. This is the photo. So just being conscious of our relationship with technology. I am addicted to my phone. I'm better than I used to be, but I'm addicted. My phone is sitting on here because I want to keep an eye on the time. It's on the black screen. If a notification appears on this phone right now, will I look down? Yes. I am neurologically compelled to look down. And will you see me looking down? Yes. In the same way that if you're having a conversation with someone and you're like the CMU Listener of the Year award winner, and someone's telling you a really difficult thing and you're being attention, and then your phone gets a notification, you'll look down, and the message is, that's more important than me right now. You can get you can kind of win them back by turning it over, saying, I'm really sorry, or putting it away. But the quality of your presence in this type of work and our ability to sit in discomfort, I think, is really significant. Okay, a couple of stories to kind of, as far as trying to illustrate these points I'm making as far as complaining. My brother teaches at a very expensive school in Switzerland. I did some work with called the Lausanne American School, wonderful school. I did some work with some students there a few years ago in which we were exploring student leadership, and they were complaining about the food at the cafeteria. And the amount of money that they were paying, it was like, okay, we should be getting more food. And the complaint was basically, my parents pay your wages, this food is not very good, but not quite as politely expressed. You need to do something about it. The way we approached it was, my first question was, how many of you have experience of catering for 400 people on a daily basis? And they're like, no. I said, okay, let's start there. So they did their homework and they tried to find out some of the challenges. And then when they had a meeting with the people at the school who ran the kitchens, they said, this is what we would like. This is what we think you'll find difficult in meeting our needs. What did we miss? What a completely different conversation that came about. It didn't happen instantly, but within a year or so, the food at the cafeteria had changed. And I think it changed because they had made the effort to get to know the challenges faced by the opposition. And that's, I think, really significant. Quick thing as far as how you get someone to do what you would like to do when you're complaining. How many of you, quick show of hands, how many of you got a driver's license? Okay, vast majority of people in the room. Please put your hands back up if you've ever broken the speed limit. Nice, honest group, thank you. My guess is the reasons why you've done that are you're running late, priorities, you were distracted, you weren't paying attention, everyone else was doing it. In fact, if you drove with the speed limit, you'd actually be causing a hazard. So you're just going with the flow, etc. Or it was fun. You don't need an expensive sports car to drive fast, and it'd be fun. Okay. How many of you would drive at 50 miles per hour past an elementary school at 8 o'clock in the morning when the parents are dropping the kids off? That's a silly question. The difference between the two is with the latter, you fully understand why it's 15 miles per hour. There's buy-in. With the first one, there's no buy-in. Any change you want to bring about, unless you have buy-in, forget about it. There are policies all around this country around diversity, equity, and inclusion that are laminated in offices and are ignored with depressing regularity because there's no buy-in or on any policy shift. So when we're complaining, the change that we want to see, working through the possible responses to it, and then trying to see, okay, how do we respond to that in a different way? An example from where I teach. So the Joan B. Kroc School of Peace Studies is named after the widow of Ray Kroc, the McDonald's founder, who left a very generous endowment, which basically set up the university, allowed it to, the Kroc School allowed it to continue. A year ago, some students were wanting to express frustration with some of the ways in which, some of the things that were being done. And they wrote, they basically, the first thing that we realized about, and I'm not sharing anything I haven't shared directly with students in terms of a critique of some of their approaches that they made. Basically, in course evaluation, suddenly there were all these copy and pasted lists. We demand, and a list of changes they wanted to see. What they hadn't realized that we didn't see those straight away. We don't get the course evaluations till the beginning of January. And there was no warning. And so we started reading these course evaluations going, what's going on? And I had a huge sympathy with a lot of the students, what they were asking for. But reading it, we demand, it felt like a ransom note. And I immediately kind of felt a sense of irritation. And then I get frustrated because I thought, okay, what's going on here? Now, when I had conversations with the students afterwards who followed up with a more nuanced letter, the we demand element was expressing a sense of urgency. That's what they were saying. This is important. This is urgent. The way I would have advised it to be approached differently or more effectively, a more effective complaint, would have been to tie it in with the original vision of the school. And it would have basically been going back to the opening of it and saying, this is what Joan B. Kroc's vision for this school was. Here's where we think it's currently not being embodied. And this is the way in which we think it could be done. It's a totally different way of doing it because you're understanding the challenges, the resistance that you're inevitably going to meet, and you figured out a way through that. Kind of a couple of more kind of things I just wanted to kind of to flag up. Elise Boulding, I think, is the forgotten, ignored founding mother of the field of peace studies. It's amazing how many foundations programs that you will see in peace studies that she's not mentioned. She was Norwegian, another Diana, another Norwegian connection. Norwegian who married a much more well-known scholar called Kenneth Boulding. The thing that I wanted to kind of highlight in terms of what we can learn from her is the importance of visions of peace, visioning peace. She basically said there's no point saying we want peace unless you've got an idea of what it actually looks like. One of my favorite words in the English language is Cody Wampum. This basically sums up my career, moving purposefully in a vague direction, and I love it for that. It resonates with a lot of students because they kind of think, I kind of think I know where I'm going, but not really. In terms of peace work, the critique, or the way I think it's good critique of what's happening is we don't have a clear enough understanding of what it is we want. What Elise Boulding was trying to encourage was, he says, we need to get creative, come up with ideas. What exactly are we talking about here? The challenge with any type of vision is this is what we normally end up with. So many social change. This is what we're going to do. I've got these ideas, I've got this passion. I'm going to make a difference in the world. This is what's going to happen. And then we end up with that. So how do we get how do we develop a clearer understanding of what we're trying to do? In order to do that, we need to get creative. We need to kind of avoid the personal abdication, which basically says, sure, I want peace, but peace means that they stop. And until they stop, I can't do anything. And that's a common characteristic around the world. Sure, we want peace, but it's not up to us. And that personal abdication, I think, is really difficult. There's a great little joke about two university professors who've been married for almost 50 years. And it was fair to say that their personal and professional relationship had been characterized by finding critique in other people's opinions and ideas. And their kids thought, okay, they're going to 50th wedding anniversary, let's get them a gift. And so they decided that they would get them some marriage guidance therapy, some counseling sessions, because they thought they're educators, they're never too late to learn. And so they had this big party and there was this gold envelope and the parents are thinking it's going to be like a cruise or something. And they open it up and it's this voucher and they're like, serious? Really? But they went along and they argued about why they were kind of going and they were late and they were arguing about why they were late. And they ended up arguing about who'd forgot to put the trash out in 1982 and whatever. And the counselor, therapist, at one point he just said, there was a pause, and he walked up and he stood up and he walked over to the old lady. He said, "Can I give you a hug?" She was like, "Okay." And he put his arms around her and he gave her a big hug, and the husband was looking a bit bewildered. And she sat down and he said to the husband, "That is what she needs 3 times a week." And the man looked back at him and said, "Well, I suppose I could bring her in on a Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday." I think that's one of the problems in this type of work. We assume someone else is going to do it. We can't. Our responsibility, if we want to complain effectively, is to develop a clear vision of what it is we're trying to do, and then to try and sell it to others. And in order to sell it to others, we need to understand their reality and the inevitable resistance that your desire change is going to bring in their status quo. One way of doing that is this idea of backcasting. So Elise Boulding didn't use this term, but this is now quite a common term in kind of project planning. It's the opposite of forecasting. Forecasting is just you predict, and this is where this kind of our current situation extended is going to get us. Backcasting is developing a really, really clear vision about what it is we want. So when it comes to kind of peace, like what would peace actually look like? One of the things that Elise Boulding did was she really pushed students. It's like, no, what do you mean? Well, we just need justice. And? Like, what's justice going to look like? Give me details. In 10 years' time, if this complaint that you've got right now has been taken away and the situation has been transformed, what do I see? Come up with details. Come up with that specifics. For those of you who are into sports, visioning is a huge part of sports, visualizing what you're going to do. We should use it in this type of work as well. And then with that kind of doing our homework, that's how we can kind of engage with the challenges that we have. A little kind of summary of what I've been trying to say and kind of explore. By developing that clear vision of what we're talking about, it becomes real to us. We get a sense of like what it is, it's creative act. Something does not exist. There's a frustration with the current situation. You want to desire a different future. It's like, what's that future look like? It's like, what is it? My daughter Eloise just yesterday was watching TV. She's like, hungry, hungry. I was like, yeah. Well, what do you mean? Hungry. I was like, turn a complaint into a request. I'm hungry, I want something to eat. I said, okay, that's a better start. Now, what would you like to eat? I don't know, I'm hungry. And so I gave through a bunch of options. No, I don't want that. It's like, giving people options, having a clear understanding as we make the complaint is a much more effective way of making it happen. Doing your homework and appreciating that resistance, the power dynamics, the frustration, the sense of change that is going to be uncomfortable for people, listening to them, being present to them, paying attention to the little things that they say will give you a clear understanding as you're strategizing about how you're going to do this. This idea of avoidable naivety, I think it's just no excuse anymore. It's like you can do your homework. You're not going to find out everything, but by following up, like, what have I missed? Like, how have I misinterpreted this? Invite a response. Invite someone to say, well, yeah, that's a good point, but you haven't said anything about that. The importance of buy-in, you need that buy-in. If you want to bring about change in anything, there needs to be the buy-in. There needs to be an understanding of what's going on. If you don't have buy-in, you're basically forcing people to do a checkbox exercise, and it's going to just go, oh yeah, fine, and forget about it. It's just not going to work. And the final point is the idea that no one in the world has ever changed their mind or what they do because they're told that they are wrong or that they can't think a certain way. It's just not going to happen. It's like, understand, invite people to the edge of their understandings. Kind of try and get them to fill in the gaps. Step out of your comfort zone. Education should be subversive. It should be uncomfortable in terms of our learning journey. It's like that does make, and that sense of discomfort, like why? What's going on there? How you do that? How do you get that understanding? And then the kind of buy-in that comes. I wanted to finish with one kind of John Paul Lederach again, and one example from work that he was doing in Nepal about social change, which I think characterizes and sums up a lot of what I was trying to explore. He says, social change starts with a simple idea. Make it accessible to local people. Go to them, listen, adapt, go back time and time again. Presence with them in their setting carries more weight than any speech or project proposal. It's that simple thing. It's like there's a respect in that. There's a respect that says, okay, your opinion matters. Is this right? No. How can we adapt it? No. What's going on, etc. How do we engage with it? Everyone is right to be full of complaints. We should complain. There are so much things in the world that we need to complain about. It's depressing, the length of those lists. I think how we complain is really significant in whether we just stay with the status quo and stay frustrated, or whether we start making little step-by-step progress towards the future that we've envisioned, that we think is important, and that because we've managed to sell it to someone else, it's walking together rather than just us, and you're coming with me. Thank you very much, everyone. I think, let me see, I always check the time. I think we managed it. I always have a sense that there's a trapdoor. Whenever I'm giving a speech, I always think there should be a trapdoor that should just start to creak open when you get into the time. But thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.